All right, everyone, it's just gone 3 minutes past 10:30, so we might make a start. We do appreciate that it is the last day of school, so for our schools-based members in particular, your time today is very precious. So first of all, my name is Dee Spink. I'm the Acting Assistant Secretary of Together. With me today, I have Michael Thomas, who is the Acting Secretary of Together. Before we start this morning, of course, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the lands of which we're meeting all across Queensland and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander members that we might have online with us today as well. So we will try to keep this to a half-hour format because, again, everyone is very busy. Please use the Q&A function if you do have questions throughout the session. We'll try to answer as many as we possibly can, but we also know that there are still a significant number of questions. So a reminder to please email education@together.org.au if you do have questions that haven't been answered yet. And I should also say that unfortunately, there are still some questions that we simply don't have answers to, which I appreciate is very frustrating, but please keep on raising those questions with us, because if you have a question, I'm sure that many other members will be thinking that as well. So thank you very much for your attendance this morning too. Sorry, I'm just having a little problem with, here we go. So of course, the reason that we are meeting today is around mandated vaccination, particularly for schools-based members, which is now classified as a high-risk setting. So we have had a briefing on Wednesday conducted by Kate Flanders. There have been a number of discussions with the department this week and since Wednesday. Of course, you also would have received an email from the Director General yesterday with an update to the process. So we thought it was timely to catch up today, particularly given that it is the last day of the school year for many of our members. As a brief recap, for those of you who might not have been able to join on Wednesday or haven't had the opportunity to re-watch that session, so we did conduct a poll of our members in regards to support broadly for the CHO mandate, and the majority of our members do support that mandate. So while it's not going to change what the CHO mandate looks like or what it will necessarily mean for you as employees of the Department of Education, it's important for us to understand where our members are coming from and what your thoughts are. So thank you for everybody who participated in that poll as well. So very frustratingly, there is still no CHO direction. So while as a recap, which I'm sure you're probably all aware of at this stage, a number of weeks ago, the Premier and Minister Grace made some announcements about what a CHO direction will mean for our employees, particularly in schools, but in some other workplaces such as youth detention centres and hospitals, and of course, hospitality areas as well. So very frustratingly, there is still no actual CHO direction. So that means we still have a fair amount of questions about some specifics for what that CHO direction will mean for our schools-based members and our education members more broadly. So we anticipate that this may happen on Monday, which is also the first day for the new Chief Health Officer of Queensland. But obviously the 17th of December is next Friday. So there are some very tight timeframes that need to be met. So the department has progressed some of this work on the basis of the announcements, which are very clear for our schools members. It is quite unequivocal in the announcements that have been made by government that if you work in a school, you will be required to be vaccinated by the 23rd of January. So there is, of course, a very significant cohort of our membership and of Department of Education employees who don't actually work inside the school. So for our corporate staff, for our regional staff, this is not as clear-cut as it is for any school-based staff. So I might just pause and throw over to Michael to talk a little bit about that.
Yes, thanks, Dee. We were provided with some draft communications yesterday, two of which to principals and people working within schools did go out, and you'll have seen that if you're in schools. There was a proposed one for corporate and regional staff along the same lines, requiring vaccine mandates on the basis that they may be required to visit schools. We have significant problems with that, raised that directly with Craig Allen and a few other people, because there's a fundamental legal difference between a mandate that is underpinned by a CHO direction, as in the CHO direction says that this people working here must be vaccinated, versus an employer direction. And the reality is, the employer would have a choice as to who is sent to schools. The employer could theoretically, there's nothing in the CHO mandate that says everyone in corporate and regional staff must be vaccinated. It's only those who visit schools. And the employer could manage that in a bunch of different ways. It could voluntarily ask people to provide their status and make sure that the people that go are those people. We could use remote teams, all of those sorts of things. So what they were proposing to do with corporate and regional staff was much more an employer choice and employer direction, and that is fundamentally legally different. There would appear to be no doubt. It's still being tested, but it's the CHO directive in Queensland is very similar to the health minister's directives in New South Wales that have been upheld in both the Supreme Court and was upheld yesterday in the Court of Appeal. So they seem pretty unassailable. An employer direction is closer to what you might have seen with the BHP case that was handed down on Friday, where it was found to be unreasonable through lack of consultation, and there is a reasonableness test applied. So we went back to the department and said, look, we think you've got real problems trying to use the CHO directive to mandate for corporate and regional staff. We think you have a requirement to consult. We think you have a requirement to discuss other options and consider those. And therefore, if you put this thing out, we will escalate it a lot, is the technical term. So on that basis, they didn't put it out. So we're expecting, there's another follow-up meeting today. We are expecting to have a number of discussions, but in my view, until they have a feeling for who is vaccinated, what other options they've got, rather than go all the way to everyone must get vaccinated, I think we may have some issues. And certainly the timeframes don't apply so much. There's time to look at the exemption process and so forth. And I'll talk a bit about some of the stand-down stuff later. So that's probably the update on that.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate that. So more information to come essentially for our corporate and regional members. So as you would have seen from the email from Craig Allen yesterday, of course, there is the vaccination survey that's occurring for all staff across the Department of Education. So as we understand it, over half of the education staff have provided their information through that survey. This is really the first step in the process for everyone. So if you haven't received a link, there is a catch-all sort of open survey link that we can certainly send out to members as well, but that should have been part of the email that you received from Craig Allen yesterday as well. One thing that the department is encouraging unions to raise with their members is that it does look slightly different to the usual emails that you'll receive. So that's the email address there at the bottom. So just keep an eye out for that as well. Potentially check your junk mail if you haven't received it too, but there are a number of ways in which you can provide that information to the department. So the next key date is this, and sorry, I should say this is for schools-based staff. The next key date is the 7th of January. So of course this is in school holidays. So I know a number of our members have already chosen to provide their status before now, so it's not something that they have to think about over the school holidays. The department will continue to contact employees up to the 7th of January if they haven't provided their vaccination status. From the next business day after Friday, the 7th of January, so Monday, the 10th of January, that's when the department will start to take action based on the information that you've provided them about your vaccination status, or if you haven't provided them any information at all. So if you are fully vaccinated and you've advised the department as such, you don't need to take any further action. You'll just return to school as usual after your leave. If you have told the department that you've had one dose, we believe it's likely that you'll need to provide some evidence of your intention to receive a second dose. So for instance, you might say, I'm booked in to see my GP on the 20th of January or something along those lines. So while the 7th of January is a deadline to let them know that, you know, in terms of vaccination, you've had at least one dose, you will need to provide information to the department that you'll be vaccinated entirely before the 23rd of January before returning to the school. So if you are unvaccinated, what the department is proposing is that they will ask you to show cause as to why you shouldn't be suspended without pay. So we understand that may be a process of a week. So they may say by the 17th of January, we need you to show cause as to why you shouldn't be suspended without pay for not complying with this direction. Similarly, if you are not providing them with any information, if you are not speaking to your doctor about an exemption, for instance, that will likely result in a show cause process for you as well. So I'll hand over again to Michael to talk about our views at this stage on the suspension process proposed.
Yeah, so we have some significant concerns over elements of this. Under the Act, if the employer believes you may be liable to disciplinary action, they can suspend for the good running of the organisation on full pay. And there's no natural justice required there. They can do it because legally the concept is because you're on full pay, there's no detriment. So therefore, natural justice doesn't apply. I think we can anticipate that's happened. We've seen that happen in police. We've seen that happen in health. So we can anticipate that will occur. I think it's also, I'm going to come back to suspension without pay. I'm going to go to the potential of termination. I think that in the long run is also a significant risk that will occur. There hasn't been to date any cases on termination for not being vaccinated against COVID, but there have been a couple of cases in the Fair Work Commissions. That's not directly applied to Queensland. That's the private sector and Commonwealth. But you know, the Queensland Commission will tend to follow fair work decisions unless there's a really good reason not to. And there's been a couple of decisions there relating to flu vaccinations where a person working in an aged care setting had not got vaccinated, was terminated, ran an unfair dismissal case that was upheld as lawful by a single commissioner and then was also appealed to a full bench of Fair Work and was upheld again. So I think in terms of suspension with pay, that's very likely to happen and difficult to challenge. And in the long run, termination, it may well be difficult to challenge. And I think by the time we get to this point in education, we'll probably have seen some cases elsewhere. The suspension without pay is a bigger problem. The Act certainly says you suspend someone with pay, and then if the chief executive believes it's necessary, they can show cause why there should not be suspension without pay. Natural justice comes into play there. But historically, that has been not the norm. It has been in situations where there may be criminal charges happening with an individual. There's reasons why finalising the disciplinary action is out of the control of the employer. So, you know, they may have to wait till the criminal charges are sorted out before they can act upon the discipline matter, because that's separate, that's administrative law rather than criminal. So that might be, you know, months, years or whatever. And at that point, even though there's a public interest in suspending people on pay because of that, you know, presumption of innocence and all of those sorts of things, it starts to get outweighed by the length of time and the lack of control over the process. It is certainly the case in police that We have 3 members to date that have been suspended without pay. We are challenging those. We have a matter on the 7th of January, which is interesting given the timings, but there's a matter on before Deputy President Merrill on the 7th of January where a decision to suspend someone without pay in police will be tested. I suspect we'll hopefully see a decision reasonably quickly. So that'll give us some guidance there. But we think it is overreach by the government to go with suspension without pay. We will challenge it. When it's all said and done, take all the hype out of COVID and vaccinations out of this, and they are disciplining for failing to follow a direction. That is, we're not talking criminal misconduct, we're not talking assault in the workplace, it's failure to follow a direction. And we think that the lowering of the previously very high threshold for suspension without pay to these circumstances is overreach. And we are challenging it, and we will be challenging it. The 7th decision will depend on individual circumstances, so it may be there are particular things with this member that don't have direct flow on, but we will certainly be arguing the general principle that the threshold should be very high, and this is way too low. And if we get the right decision, that will provide us great guidance in education as well.
Thanks, Michael. And as Michael has certainly alluded to, we are supporting our members through those processes should you find yourself in the situation that you do need support.
I think that's important to say, because there's one thing to say, okay, there's a CHO mandate and telling members that we could stop something that there's already been Supreme Court decisions on. That would be misleading members to their detriment. People need to understand that the way the legal, regardless of personal views, the way the legal decisions are going to the moment, a decision not to get vaccinated is likely to have significant impacts on employment, not just in the public service, but I suspect wider in the community. And we'll be upfront with members about that. But we will absolutely hold the employer to account if they try to do a botched process, an unreasonable process, or an unfair process. And we will absolutely challenge that as far as we need to. So
thanks, Michael. I appreciate that. Thank you. Now, when we, as you probably would have seen from the email from your employer yesterday as well, there is a pathway for exemptions. Because of the nature of the mandate in education, whereby it is a CHO direction, we understand that the exemption process will be very narrow. So essentially looking at the ATAGI exemptions on a medical basis regarding medical contraindications. We might be able to put that link in the chat, but if you Google ATAGI exemptions, it's very easy to find as well. So that is a very narrow process as well. So we do want to be upfront with members that while there is a pathway through the survey to say I'm seeking a medical exemption, members should be aware that it is likely to be a very strict criteria under which you would be granted an exemption. And of course, that will need to be backed up by medical practitioner advice regarding that as well. So we know that there are still a number of outstanding questions, and there may be a number of those questions that we simply can't get answers to until we see the CHO direction. We certainly encourage members to continue sending those questions through to us, education@together.org.au. You can, of course, also contact the union office by calling 1-800-177-244 if you prefer to do that over the phone. You should also feel that you can ask your employer these questions too. So while we will continue putting these questions on the table, and we have a briefing with the department immediately after this meeting as well, where we will continue to put those questions on the table. Please don't be shy about contacting us through education@together.org.au, because we do understand that there are a lot of questions, a lot of different scenarios that you might find yourself in. So please don't feel that any question is a silly one when it comes to this process. And yeah, just to acknowledge as well that we do appreciate that it's frustrating that the timeframes are so close. A number of you will be commencing leave from this afternoon, and there's still a lot of unknowns there too. So we're probably going to wrap it up here for today. And, you know, on that note that many people are taking leave, please do make sure that your details are up to date with us. If you jump on the Together website, you'll be able to update your details. Of course, you know, please feel free to email through to education@together.org.au, and we can keep that updated as well. We know we've got a couple of suggestions from members about how to keep particularly our schools-based members informed over the school holiday period. So please do, you know, make sure that if you need to reach out to us, we're still here in the office, and we will keep you updated. As soon as we're hearing more, we will continue to keep members updated. So please do, you know, do periodic check-ins if that's something that, you know, you still have questions about or you've got concerns about. So unless, Michael, there's anything from you.
Just to say, there was a number of questions sort of coming through. I think
yes,
we've managed to answer most of them. If there's some we haven't, we'll come back to you. We've got a recording and we can cover that. So hopefully we've hit most of the queries there. There might be one or two we haven't in this time frame, but we will come back to you on that. So thank you.
Yes, thank you everyone, and thank you so much for participating at short notice, we know, with these Zoom briefings, and congratulations on another school year. Well done, and we hope you do get to enjoy some very well-deserved leave over the period whenever you do get to take it. And yes, please remember that you can contact us with any of your questions, and we're here to support you and help you work through what we know is a very challenging time for a lot of people. So thank you again for your time this morning. We really appreciate it, and you'll certainly be hearing more from us in the very near future. So take care, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.